Welcome back to AP US History. We're going to carry on here and talk about the Jacksonian era, Jacksonian democracy. Jackson will become president in 1828, and his tenure will be for 8 years, and he'll be elected 2 terms to the presidency. What were the Democratic trends? The trend seemed to be this way. Um, More voter eligibility. It started out in the beginning that you had to be a part of the church, you had to be a taxpayer, you had to be a property owner, you had to be a white male. Um, Eventually, these restrictions will be reduced to simply being a white male. Um, and this is going to give a tremendous boost to the disenfranchised, those at the bottom of the social scale. By 1820s, politicians made an increased effort to appeal to voters on a massed basis. Um, Unfortunately, still offices were held by wealthy citizens. There's going to be a fundamental change. Now, under the Jeffersonians, they believed that it was government that governed least. They would probably have believed that only the wealthy and the educated should do the governing, but you should govern for the people. Now, under the Jacksonian democracy, or this trend, is government by the people, more participation within the system. And explains some of Jackson's spoil system that we'll talk about later. This new democracy will be based on universal male suffrage, and of course property and taxpayer requirements and church attendance is going to go by the way. Between 1812 to 1821, 6 new states will be brought into the Union, and they will grant universal male suffrage. And this is certainly going to give the West more clout. Between 1810 and 1821, eastern states will gradually start reducing the voter requirement until they eventually come to the point of universal male suffrage. Suffrage, again, the right to vote. The South was the last region to grant male universal suffrage, and we'll find that a lot of things that the South do puts them behind the West and the North. New voters demanded that politicians represent their interest, and as you can see here on this map, property requirements in 1800 in terms of voting, and you can see by 1830, 30 years later, the property requirement has been dropped, and it's mostly taxpayer qualification, and there are some states that have just male universal suffrage. You just had to be a free white male adult, and you were able to vote. And this is going to be significant. Jackson was not necessarily the person who caused all this, but he certainly was the recipient. There is a change of attitude, something about the common man having a greater voice in government. Now, somebody you'll have to remember for the AP exam is Frederick Jackson Turner. He came up with what he called the frontier thesis. He said that the West was really the reason why America becomes more democratic, and believes that everyone should have an equal chance. He believed that the West shaped our culture, our character, rugged individualism. There was far more opportunities in the West, and people are going to seize those. There was the rise of the working man's parties in the industrial area in the North. And they will push for some reforms. One, they will demand a free education for their children. They will demand a 10-hour workday, and they will demand an end to debtor prisons. And all these things will come about because these common folks at the bottom of the scale have the power of the vote, and politicians will have to cater to them. Some of the groups became violent, especially during the Panic of 1837. One group that was of interest was the Locus Focus. This was a group of Democrats who sought reform for labor. They are later going to be absorbed by the Democratic Party, but they are going to be a third party for a while. One thing that we'll understand is that third parties come and go, but they don't really stay around too long. They will push for the specie circular, and we'll talk about this later, about buying Western land with gold rather than paper. Some of the causes of this new democracy, why did it happen? Well, the Panic of 1819, it was similar to the Great Depression. A lot of people were out of work. People lost their homes. Most people blame bankers and speculators for the loss of their homes and farms. Here again, this is the Locus Focus. They supported Jackson and Van Buren for the presidency. Their name means crazy lights, and it was a situation, an organization where they would light candles and talk about politics, and hence they got this name, Crazy Lights. But they're going to push for more democracy and reforms in government. An answer was not to get more political. The answer was to get more political involved, and these people will. And so they want control of the government to reform the Bank of the United States, which some of them see as oppressive. Jackson believed that the Bank of the U.S. Was oppressive, and he'll personally kill it himself while he's president of the United States. State legislatures waged tax wars against the Bank of the United States. One court case that we'll look at is McCulloch versus Maryland, which was an important case because it upheld the Bank of the United States and said it was constitutional, although it will eventually be killed by Jackson and his supporters. States do reduce debtor prisons. This is something that they carried over from England. When you couldn't pay your debts, you were thrown into jail. Good luck trying to collect a debt. This was the age of new politics. We know that after the election of 1800, the Federalists will die out. It becomes a one-party country up through Jackson, and then when Jackson becomes president, at the end of his term, well, at least his second term, the Whig Party will develop, and we will have a two-party system again. Voter turnout was 25% in the election of 1824 and 75% in election of 1840. So more people are going to be involved in the politics, mainly because they have a chance to vote. There will be campaigns, there will be people who wear badges, kiss babies, have barbecues, try to win the vote. Voting reforms, the caucus will be done away with. That is, the party bosses deciding who gets to run, and it will be open to the people in the state to decide in a primary election as to who will run for the different offices. Members of the Electoral College will be elected by the people rather than state legislature. So this is significant. They will have their first nominating convention in 1831, which is going to be the trend throughout the states, people nominating individuals to run for various political offices. So voters choose their state slate of presidential electors. The spoil system is part of this, where you get jobs if you support a particular candidate. The rise of third parties, of course, popular campaigning, two-party system. This shows kind of the transition that we'll see. The Democratic Republicans, the National Republicans, the Whigs, and the Republicans eventually in 1854. The Democrats would essentially stay the way they are. This shows the voting turnout between 1820 to 1860, and you can see that this was a tremendous increase in the number of people voting for various candidates, particularly in the presidential candidate. Jackson's first run as president, he ran against John Quincy Adams, who was the son of John Adams. John C. Calhoun will run, and William Crawford. The two primary candidates, Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams, are really the two that challenged Jackson the most. Now, Jackson will win on popular vote and electoral votes, but unfortunately, he is not going to be chosen as President of the United States. Jackson has a lot of things going for him. One, he seems to be a man of the people. He's a war hero, Indian fighter. He's a rugged man that people can admire. He's a man's man. Now, on the election of 1824, this is a term that you'll need to know, is called the corrupt bargain. Essentially, Jackson won the election, but Henry Clay, will throw his support to John Quincy Adams in the House of Representatives, and he will eventually be declared the winner of the presidential election. A lot of the Jackson supporters cry foul. They believe that Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams made some kind of bargain, because as soon as John Quincy Adams became president, he appointed Henry Clay as his Secretary of State. So there's going to be a long feud between Henry Clay and Jackson, and so because of that feud, Henry Clay is going to throw his support to John Quincy Adams. This shows the election of 1824, and you can see that John Quincy Adams won the New England area, whereas Andrew Jackson won the West and the South, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland. It certainly is a close vote, and you can see that Jackson won the electoral vote by 99, and John Quincy Adams had 84. But because there wasn't a majority, that went to the House of Representatives, and they'll decide. And Henry Clay will convince people in the House of Representatives to vote for John Quincy Adams. So John Quincy Adams will become the president for the next 4 years. Hence the corrupt bargain, because John Quincy Adams, some felt, had paid off Henry Clay with a promise that he would become the Secretary of State. And it's interesting to note that the stepping stone to the presidency was not through the vice presidency, but through the Secretary of State. So this was a calculated move by Henry Clay to capture the White House. And he will run several times unsuccessfully to be President of the United States. Now we'll stop here, and we'll come back and we'll pick up the Tariff of Abomination in 1828 and why this was so offensive to the South. And we'll stop right there.